the political propaganda twists that were used in there. And that's exactly what it was defined to do. It does not actually make sense if a person is approaching it with real logic. But folks, then again, think about it. Think about what's happening all around us right now today. And think about this quote-unquote financial crisis that your media wants you to consider and think it was like a natural disaster. It was like a hurricane or a series of tornadoes. No. It's designed by calculation. And this notion of too big to fail is just one more example of a Hegelian dialectic itself. So, ladies and gentlemen, when we come back after the break, we'll continue talking about the Hegelian dialectic and how it is forming all of the events happening around us today. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome back to the Crimson Pill. I am your host, Antonin Feori. We're at 23 minutes after the hour here on Republic Broadcasting Network. Folks, before we continue our exposition here, we're talking about $10 words like Hegelian dialectic, but we're talking about how it's actually pinching every single one of us right in our rear end and right in our wallet each and every day these days. Before I continue with that, let me talk about also getting pinched in the wallet in a different way. Folks, ever since I started listening to Republic Broadcasting Network a couple years back, I've been blown away by the quality of the programming that I hear, the work of the hosts, the extensive research that they do, the informed and knowledgeable guests that they bring on. And I cannot think of any better investment to make in any source of information or news or media that I bring into my home than RBN itself and the variety of information we get from the hosts. I mention this, folks, because there's an awful lot of expense that goes into running the network. And on the RBN webpage, there's an opportunity to donate there. There's also the telephone number available that you can call into if you prefer to speak with someone live over the phone to handle that type of an order, use a credit card or whatever other means. You can send in a check. But you can call that phone number to deal with someone live, or you can donate over the internet with that tool that's right on the RBN main page. But I would ask folks that you consider kind of lending a hand, pitching in. Whatever is the right amount for you, all I can say is please consider what it is that any of us spend on either cable or the satellite dish or the news, daily newspaper for that matter. And at least from my perspective and opinion, the information I get from these hosts on RBN blows all that other stuff away. And I contribute to this effort on RBN myself, and I would hope that maybe you will consider to do the same. Now, before the break, we're talking about the continued series of disclosures, informational releases being made by the Department of Defense, and also their public relations wing that they call NASA, these informational releases that they've made. But I've also told you that all of this is leading up to something. What is it? Why is it that they're now all of a sudden beginning to tell the truth? And as we think about all of these so-called world leaders and folks who have been involved in their own cover-ups and scandals, if it's Clinton, if it's Weiner from New York, they don't begin to tell the truth and to come clean with things until they know that they can no longer hide what it is that they've been hiding. And when we think about what the DoD, Department of Defense, has been releasing vis-a-vis NASA, these informational releases, we know that they are realizing they can no longer hide something. Now, how does this tie over to what I was discussing just before the break, the Hegelian dialectic, which again, for me, I just convert those words back to problem, reaction, solution. Every false flag operation that RBN listeners are aware of that have been utilized by our own government and intelligence community and military, as well as those around the world, they've all really been built on that Hegelian dialectic. Create a problem, propose, watch the public's reaction to it, the fear, the outrage, and then propose a solution which fits into what their ultimate plan was in the first place. But don't forget that important part, that first step. They are the ones that create the problem themselves. And I actually think that that is what is behind this series of announcements and news releases that they have been forcing themselves to make. I mention this in part to draw your attention more so to today's current events. Folks, look at what's happening around us right now. Look at the stock market. Look at the gold and silver price moves that we've been witnessing. Take a look at the collapse of the economies of what's been in a couple European nations thus far. But folks, we know that the larger collapse is on its way and it's imminent. And why is that relevant to us? Well, because, folks, problem, reaction, solution, the system itself has set up exactly what their solution is going to be. And I point your attention to the National Security and Homeland Security Presidential Directive. Some people filter that down. They just call it National Security Presidential Directive 51 and or Homeland Security Presidential Directive HSPD 20. Basically, the simplest way to call it is Executive Directive 51. Now, if you're not familiar, that was created and signed by George Bush the Younger, King George II, on May the 4th of 2007. And this presidential directive gives the power to execute procedures for continuity of government. Now, if you're not familiar with the continuity of government stuff, folks, you need to start doing some homework there. And let me give you a teaser as to why. It sets up the power structure and the decisions that can be made centralized in the office of the president alone. So in the hands of one single individual, bypassing Congress, bypassing the judicial branch altogether, in the event of some quote-unquote catastrophic emergency. Now, such an emergency can be construed as any incident, regardless of location. I'm quoting, any incident, regardless of location, that results in extraordinary levels of either mass casualties, damage, or disruption severely affecting the U.S. population, infrastructure, environment, economy, or government functions. That's right. Included in that list, folks, is economy. So any significant disruption severely affecting the U.S. economy by itself would provide the authority, the launching point for the one individual, the President of the United States, to declare catastrophic emergency and basically institute absolute martial law. Begin, institute, and engage in this continuity of government process that strips away any and all constitutional protections for you and I, the taxpayers. Please join us on the other side of the break. We'll be joined by Lark from Texas. Ladies and gentlemen of the RBN listening audience, welcome back to the Crimson Pill program. I am your host, Antonin Feori. We're at 34 minutes after the hour here on Republic Broadcasting Network. And I am very, very pleased to be joined by the latest addition to the host and program lineup on RBN, and that is Lark from Texas, the person that so many of us have enjoyed hearing his telephone call-in commentary and his thoughts and perspective on so many of these issues. And Lark is going to be joining the RBN hosting lineup actually in this time slot, Saturday afternoons from 2 to 3 p.m. Central Time each week. And Lark, I'd just like to say welcome to the program. Thanks for joining, and how are you today?
Well, thank you so much, and I'm fine. I'm always happy to be tuned into the radio and find refuge from all the socialists running around out in the world, as you know.
Exactly. Well, Lark, I know that so many of the folks, the loyal listeners, are just as excited as I am to have you be joining the hosting lineup. And, you know, my hope is before today's show concludes, because this will be your time slot moving forward starting next week, maybe toward the end, toward the top of the hour, we can have you talk just a little bit about maybe some perspective you have for the show, sort of setting the stage, so to speak.
I'm happy to do that.
Well, super. For now, though, what I'm hoping is I've been talking here the first part of today's program about the Hegelian Dialectic, problem, reaction, solution, how that has been shaping so much of what our governmental institutions have been doing to us in recent years. And I'm just curious, Lark, kind of a wide open question. Tell me about your thoughts, sort of your perspective on these issues.
Well, to tell you the truth, 6 years ago, I'd never heard of the Hegelian Dialectic.
Okay.
I didn't have a clue about anything regarding Hegel. That would be George Friedrich Hegel, a philosopher. And but I found it, I came to the truth of and some understanding of the Hegelian dialectic because I recognized that all politicians today employ it.
Mm.
The most successful ones are the ones who are quite skilled in its usage. because, frankly, all it does is this divides people and creates conflict.
Yes. Yep.
And it prevents us from seeing the true picture, the full picture in a fuller context of things, simply because we're oftentimes presented false reality as indicative by the false choices that we're often presented with.
Okay. Yep. Yep.
And of course, as it relates to the Hegelian dialectic, I actually found out about the Hegelian dialectic through the back door, if you will, in my research. And it's because I stumbled upon communitarianism and communitarian law.
Ah. Maybe speak to that point for a moment.
Well, communitarianism is a new ism, which many Americans simply don't recognize, even people who are well educated, because people are compartmentalized, as we all understand, in their access to information and our knowledge. And this suits the central planners, the socialists, the communitarians quite well. It works to their advantage. And, it promotes what they consider the operative principle of governance, and that is through fear. Fear, of course, that acronym, false evidence appearing real.
I like that.
And I like acronyms, and I tend to remember them. So
and I think what's very telling also is that fear is really what's at the root of the reaction element of problem, reaction, solution. They create the problem intentionally so that the public has a reaction, and most typically the most effective reaction is fear, and then they bring about their already predetermined solution, but they bring it to the table to appear to be the savior for that crisis that they created to impose the fear. Would that be fair to say?
Oh, and of course that solution is always predetermined, because today these behaviorists, these sociologists, people in think tanks, they actually conduct focus groups. They take polls. They take the pulse of the population, the human herd, so that they can predict with some measure of accuracy what will be acceptable as a solution for this dialectical conflict.
Yes.
Which, of course, was created by the same people providing the solution.
There you have it. Yes. Yeah. And they study it quite carefully, don't they? They fund the research extravagantly, almost as though we're like lab rats, don't they?
Well, without realizing that they themselves are lab rats, because they're the ones that have been indoctrinated, shall we say, educated, to essentially ape or mimic the talking points and the language of their indoctrinators.
Yes, yeah.
And these are the very people that are quite enslaved. They're very much the lemmings, as we the people are lemmings in such a scenario. Quite
right, quite right. I wonder, Lark, if you would be willing to point out maybe one or two examples that, once again, all of us every day, we're caught up in our issues and our troubles, but what are a couple of the examples of the Hegelian dialectic in action, employed over this last few years that you would point listeners to, considering to sort of connect those dots?
Well, in every case, no matter the conflict, when a question is presented and a solution is demanded, when consensus or compromise is sought, because it appears to be the only solution that will be workable, given the divide which has been implanted in our brains as being reality. I always have to ask myself, well, gee, is this really my fight? And I always have a sense that all solutions must be a collective solution, when in fact the solutions that matter to